Right? Perfect. I see it saying live streaming.
Yeah, now it's going. It always takes some time. So,
Hmm.
welcome to the show. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Wanwipa. Please help me with your with your name again. It's
Yes, Wanwipa Siriwatwechakul.
welcome to the show. You're a scientist, an educator, an investor, and work at the intersection of industry, climate, and innovation. And
Hmm.
to open our conversation, I would like to ask the first question to your journey,
Hmm.
which is amazing. You were at MIT, Princeton. You had some years as a professor in Bangkok. You work
Yes,
now as a venture capitalist between Palo Alto and Bangkok,
yes.
connecting basically the whole world in between. When we look at your life, which story would you choose from your life if it would just choose one story that best explains why you do this work today? Which story would you
Mm.
pick?
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. And um, if I were to choose one moment, I think I have to choose COVID-19. I know it sounds like a cliche, right? But when you face with kind of a global pandemic, it makes you think, you realign your priorities, right? Because when I was a professor, or looking back, I've always loved learning, love technology. So I thought, going through bachelor degree, PhD degree, being educated from a world-class institution like MIT and Princeton. So I thought, um, I want to scale this love of learning through teaching, right? Being professor is very fulfilling. I've had great students in my life who've gone on to be build successful venture, very interesting venture. But when COVID came around, when COVID hit, and I think a lot of people have went through the same journey. They think, oh, we want to help, we want to be agile, quick at reacting to this global event. But being restricted in kind of a university setting, I feel that it was not allowing me to be as quick as I wanted to be. And you rearrange your priorities. There are things that you want to do that you think, like it can wait, but now all of a sudden it cannot wait. And we want to accomplish, and we want to have impact tomorrow, and we want to make it happen. That's why I feel like I want to make a change going into developing some of these technologies so that it can impact wider audience, and have a real impact, as opposed to when you are teaching, you're hopefully one day somebody will pick up your research and develop it into a product or solution.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a completely different level. You not only have academic experience and experience as a venture capitalist, you also worked in the industry, in the petrochemical industry, where you trained over 100 engineers into oil, gas, and petrochemicals. When did it first hit you that you didn't just want to train talent for the old system, but help build new systems as a venture capitalist?
I think it's kind of a slow shift, and it's there's no single moment, right? And I'll tell you why. So I actually started my career in oil and gas. So my PhD research is in fracturing fluid. So I don't know if the audience are familiar with the process, right? Fracking or fracturing process is when you pressurize liquid to fracture the rock surface so that you can stimulate and recover more oil. So what I was working on is looking at these behavior of the liquid that we pump in. So ideally, we want the liquid that can build up high pressure so it crack the rocks easier. But when the oil is being recovered, these liquid does not impede, does not stop the flow back so that we can recover the oil easier. So I was working with polymers, plastics in solution. My early part of my career was extension of that, looking at different application of polymers, plastic. And then in about 2010, a friend of mine who's been working with microbes, they said, hey, why don't we think of a new way of, instead of making these chemicals, like going into the lab, cranking out chemicals, having catalysts, heating them up, why don't we throw in the microbes and make them work for us, right? So that's the first time I thought, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we actually can redesign this process, right? But even in that process, I feel, like when you grow microbes, so it's the same process as beer. So you have a big tank, you throw the yeast, you throw the sugar and in the beer tank, it forms beer. But in this case, we throw in the yeast, well, not the yeast, a different type of microbes, and throw in sugar, and it produce some chemicals, right? But when you're working in that type of process, it's in research phase. So you make at most what, 10, 20 gram at a time, right? So I mean, it's great. I think it was a great start. That's why I got excited about it because, hey, instead of making beer or kimchi, right? This we make industrial chemical. But it's still in a very, very small scale. So after COVID, I run into Jane, who's now managing partner at Vectors Capital. So she took me to a company that she invested in when she was an angel investor. It's called Huue. So they use genetic tools in order to make the microbes to produce indigo dye. So when you go in the lab, um, when um, when I talked about you do beer fermentation, I don't know if you've done homebrew beer. So it's milky like, and then it goes through different process, and then it becomes clear yellow liquid, right? But here you have everywhere you turn around, it's indigo dye color. So I'm like, wow. Instead of making the chemicals in the lab like I did, this they can make actual industrial chemicals equivalent to how we make it in, industrial scale process. But this, we just use sugar and let the bacteria grows, and then it turns out to be equivalent product. They dry it and dye the jeans. It's the same quality. They wash it. It looks exactly the same. So that was kind of where I reach epiphany. Hey, what I do as a professor, if you actually have courage and the team to build it into a company, it could be an industrial process. So that kind of shift in me, that slow shift to see how one can go from a totally chemical process into a benign, not high temperature, not using a lot of acid, that use microbes to grow pretty much the equivalent thing and do much less harm to the environment.
That's a great story. It's basically your Genentech moment where you moved from one part, from academia, into the venture capital part.
Mm-hmm.
But there is still one step missing for me that I would like to explore a little bit more, the step into climate tech and climate change.
Mm-hmm.
And in the preparation material, I read that you described being motivated to mitigate the negative externalities of the petrochemical industry.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at this mission, is this mainly an intellectual mission for you, or is there more a personal, emotional driver behind it?
Um, it it is a little bit of both, right?
Mm,
For me, the intellectual part of me is, yes, we want to find better solution. But then emotionally better in what way, right? And being in Thailand, I mean, we used to be one of the top 10 countries most impacted by climate change. I think the ranking is changing a little bit, but I mean, we see firsthand now the storms are getting a lot stronger. I live in Bangkok.
mm,
10 years ago, we never had, well, no, we only have floodings when it's like really major storm, but this we have every year. And I don't know if you've been following the news in the southern part of Thailand, they got hit with the storm. This is like once in a century storm that is inundated commercial area. This is a very lively commercial area. When, yes, we can clean up after the storm passed, but are we going to be doing this every year now? And I mean, there is there are things where there is no monetary value, right? You imagine a house, the first floor is being flooded. I mean, this is, we talk about memories, photos, things that are of sentimental value. And this is, I'm not even talking about the loss of lives, right?
mm.
And those are irreplaceable. So for me, then it becomes more it's getting more and more personal now. How do we mitigate these, prevent it from going even crazier, right? Because I think 5 or 10 years ago, we say it's once in a lifetime storm, but this once in a lifetime is happening every year now.
So you experience in Thailand the results of climate change on a yearly basis, basically. You see the
Yes,
difference.
yes. Yes, now we have every time it storms, every time it rains, the rain gets so concentrated. The it's almost like what do we call it? It almost feel like the amount of rain that we used to get in a month concentrated in like a few days. So that's why we a flooding get flooded every year. But on the other hand, in the summer, it gets really hot, and there started to be area of water shortage in Thailand. So then we go through these natural disaster of too much water and not enough water. And it's this cycles that it's almost like you can already predict every year now. And I don't think this is unique to Thailand, right? I think we started to see this in other parts of the world also. I think Philippines also it's being hit with much stronger storm than they had experienced in the past. In Hong Kong, Taiwan, a lot of countries around Asia, and I'm sure even if for you guys, you probably cycle through a lot of snow and not enough snow and all the kind of alternative year by year as well.
Yeah, it's changing. It's changing. It's changing
Yeah,
also here around.
yeah.
Um, when we tackle this topic, climate change, a little bit later in the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
for the opening phase, let's move to your life story and
Mm-hmm.
explore it further. Um, let's just imagine you could go back in time
Mm-hmm.
and you could meet your younger self at the time when you were at Princeton. I think you studied for a PhD. And when you would have a conversation with yourself at this time, what would surprise your younger self the most about your work that you are doing today as a climate tech investor?
This is actually very interesting that this conversation brought up a lot of good memory So when I think I did mention I love learning, I love technology, right? So when I was a young researcher, or so focusing on pushing technology envelope, we do research for the sake of researching. You want to be the first to discover new technology, but here as uh, as I spent a few years doing investing, looking at new startup, new venture, I think we pay a lot more attention to who will use that technology. What would the technology serve the market? Is there any other alternative technology? So it's not about being the first or being the only one who can do the who can crack the technology. Now being investor or a startup founder or a venture builder, it's more about how do we make good use of technology to serve the society or the pain point of the market.
That's great. And after finishing your PhD studies, you also then spent 15 years teaching.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm curious to hear is, I mean, academia, industry, and then you have this middle ground between building companies. When you look at your time at academia and the teaching, how
Mm-hmm.
does this experience shape the way you talk with founders and investors today?
Um, I think being a college professor gave me kind of an insight into how somebody who has little knowledge or looking at things from a different perspective from you think. So it's almost like I can kind of foresee what students won't understand. So I use that to kind of have use that kind of mindset, right? To have conversation with founder, right? So trying to, because I understand founder would know more than me. So I want to make sure I communicate what I don't understand to them so that they can better answer my questions. Because sometimes I feel like there's a lot of assumptions. And I see this in seasoned investors as well. There are a lot of assumptions that founder would know this and that, or other people they talk to would know all the
Mhm.
lingos, and I think and having kind of experience with different level of students, right? You come with a certain knowledge base, so I think kind of help grease grease the conversation, I guess. And hopefully I don't make the founder uncomfortable, because sometimes when you ask questions, I think people get self-conscious as well. But hopefully that didn't make the turn the founder off.
Are you tempted sometimes to say when your founder comes in, welcome to the exam, so please sit down?
I think you're right, and I try not to be so professorial.
Mhm.
I still think I do, because but hopefully, and sometimes I just preface it to be, no, I'm trying to be formal. I'm not interrogating you. I just
Interrogating.
want, yeah, I just wanted to know because these are very important for my decision. So hopefully that doesn't put them off.
What I find interesting is the switch between roles. So, I mean, basically, in time, it just looks like nothing. Yeah? So, if you're one business card one day and another business card another day, one day you are a professor, the other day you're a venture capitalist. But basically, what needs to change, I mean, these are completely different roles. So, academic
Hmm.
professor is one role, um, venture capitalist is another role. When you look at yourself internally, what I'm curious to learn is what belief did you need to change about your own role in the world when you switched gears and moved to this new role?
Mm. Actually a great question. Because when I wear a professor hat, people feel like I know all the answer. Versus if I wear like an investor hat, I think it gives me more kind of a license to be more like outright being curious, right? But anyway, regardless of what I do, I tell myself that I I don't know everything. Even being a professor, I don't know everything. And this is so difficult for students to accept. When I say I really don't know, they say I think they give me this puzzle look. But I try to keep this curiosity. Like I guess I try to maintain this learning mindset because I cannot know everything, right?
That's true. Is this such a difference in these two roles that you really experience that your students expect you to know everything and that you can be you're basically much freer as a venture capitalist to ask questions and be curious and say, okay, I don't know anything, so just tell me. Is it such a huge difference that you experience?
Yeah, actually, because um, like when we talk to startups, right? I think I'm quite free to ask a lot of random questions versus yeah, in professor role, I think there's that expectation that I know the answer when and even when I said I don't know, I think it's so difficult for people to accept, like students to accept that. And but then I at least will try to give them guiding questions, at least trying to fulfill that role to give them guiding questions. And even with the I think the mindset is the same, but you're right, the role is slightly different. So be more guiding as opposed to being just curious and learn what the startup is doing. But what I can also, I think in both roles, I think the role that keeping this learning mindset will also hopefully help the startups can provide some feedback to the startup whether or not they want it. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Let's switch gears and move to industrial redesign.
Mm-hmm.
I picked it up from your preparation material, and in the material you talk about a fundamental shift,
Mm-hmm.
which I found quite interesting, and I would like to dig a little bit deeper into that.
Mm-hmm.
It's I understood it as decarbonization by redesigning industries and
Mm-hmm.
not just reducing emissions.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between these two mindsets in practice? Decarbonization by redesigning industries versus just reducing emissions.
So I'll give you okay, so normally when we are talking about decarbonization, right? So for example, I'll 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 give you an example of automotive, right? So if you use internal combustion engine to reduce the to reduce carbon dioxide emission, you add different components, right? Catalytic converter. You may add carbon some sort of device to capture carbon dioxide that's released. So you add a lot more component just to solve this problem of carbon dioxide emission. But think about if we rethink this process, um, does the car have to emit carbon dioxide?
Mhm.
What just like what Tesla is doing, right? So we do electric vehicle. So all of a sudden, you change the way the car is driven. It's driven by electricity. It doesn't generate greenhouse gas emission. So you don't have to add all these extra components, which adding cost. So I'm giving these two examples because you can imagine if you do things the usual way, you have to add more and more component. So it would only cost more. And when you think about it that way, then reducing carbon dioxide will become a burden, right? Versus if you rethink this process, redesign this car using electricity, you don't have to worry about CO2 emission. You build a new industry, and which is thriving actually in some country, um, China being the leader, and having a new company. I mean, Tesla was never a car company before, and because they built EV, right? So it's
Mm.
a new industry, new company. So, and I think this should be how we view it, right? Another good example is cement. So we see if you study cement industry, it's highly energy intensive, right? You burn rock at God knows 1,000 Celsius, 1,000, 2,000 Celsius, right? Imagine how much heat that goes into it, and not only the energy intensive in intensity, burning this rock generates CO2 by itself, right? Because we burning off calcium carbonate to generate calcium oxide. So very in carbon intensive industry. Now there are a good number of startups and companies that redesigning a new process. There are a handful of startups that are using microbes
Mhm.
to grow calcium oxide, calcium derivative that is a major component of the cement. So we bypass this heating, we bypass generating CO2, and even better, these microbes actually use CO2 to generate component in cement. And this is only one example. There are also the example of using electricity to convert some of these components. So, and if they scale successfully, that would be a new company, that would be a new business that we don't have to think about, because right now cement plant has to build carbon capture that is unit that is also very expensive. It's also energy intensive because adding on more and more component to solve the problem, it's only going to cost more when we can redesign the process. And so I think that might be something that we as a whole industry need to rethink. And this is why new ideas from startup, new adventures, it's really going to inject new ways of thinking how we can carry on industrial process that makes more sense in the next century.
Yeah, great examples, especially I think for Europe. It's interesting to see that the move from combustion engine to EVs basically caught the entire industry, I would say, basically off guard. Did nobody expected here in Europe that something is going to happen? And Tesla was laughed at, I think, until 2018, 2019, 2020.
Mm.
Um, so your concept basically is to really encourage startups to rethink entire industries from the ground up and not just incremental change.
Yes, yes. And that's kind of the startups we're looking for, right? Because I already gave these two examples. If we build this incremental change, solve the problem, then it becomes cost center, it becomes cost prohibitive. So adoption will be difficult. So those may not survive at the end because industry may not want to adopt the solution, as opposed to when you come up with a new solution that makes sense, that are cost competitive, at least in a long run. So then there is a better chance of adoption towards the end.
And you view it through the lens of a venture capitalist, so not from a philanthropic endeavor. And this, I think, is still a problem in many regions, especially Europe with old money, where many investors still treat sustainability as we're doing something good to the world, it feels well. Some call it ESG theater, I think, especially with the geopolitical change that we saw recently in the last 2 years. Let's challenge those people a little bit. And when you look at it from your perspective, what's the biggest misconception these investors have that is literally costing them money?
Right. I'll give the similar example, right? Similar carbon capture example, but in a different setting. So I'm sure, I mean, we're all inundated with AI news and data center, right? And one of the costs from running these data center is the first energy intensity, and because of these energy intensity that is consumed in the data center generate a lot of heat and produce CO2 emission, right? So a lot of people address this by, buying carbon credit, um, supporting carbon capture technology. In reality, uh, there are a few smart startups that actually, instead of wasting this heat, try to recycle it.
Mhm.
Or, for example, there are some smart technology, some startup that are using that heat that is generated from data center towards carbon capture.
Mhm.
This is kind of a circular economy that makes sense instead of just buying carbon credit, right? Can we make good use of this extra heat? And I've seen some companies, uh, food company, that use a lot of steam, a lot of heating for drying. They're trying to recapture that waste heat and recycle it back. So it's not about the company fulfilling their green goal or sustainability goal, but it's actually for their economic viability. So I think that's a win-win. So they
Mhm.
can capture that green and sustainability and make them feel good, but it makes economic sense first.
So this means basically that in your center example, you find new revenue streams for them. So if they can use the heat commercially, they can just
Right.
sell it as a product or as a service at the end of the day.
Exactly. Right,
That
right.
makes
And
sense.
yeah, and it makes economic sense. It makes uh environmental sense, right? Because if you kind of relieve that heat, there's no other way to go. You
Mhm.
have to go through heat exchanger, cooling it down before you release it into the environment.
So you capture it twice. On one hand, you reduce the needs of buying carbon credits. So you
Um,
reduce the cost, and on the other hand, you create new revenue streams for them. So this is a double
Exactly,
win.
exactly. It's you create a new revenue streams, right? Whether or not you it replace a carbon credit, I think it's it's up to the company to decide. And I
Mhm.
think it's fine. There's nothing wrong with carbon credit, but I think just carbon credit alone for the company to fulfill some green goal, I don't think that makes a lot of sense in this day and age.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But
Yeah.
still, I think when we look at these new industries, when they appear, there is always many people ignore it for a very long time. You
Hmm.
mentioned Tesla. Um, do you have one other example, like as Tesla, maybe from your own portfolio, one concrete example where this redesign model or this rethinking industries from the ground up already beats the big corporations in that sector on cost, reliability, and margins?
Mm. Already beating, hold on, I'm trying to think. Uh, because a lot of them are still trying to scale up.
Mhm.
Uh, but I'll give you this example that makes logical sense. One of the company we just invested in, Solidec, they use electrolyzer to produce hydrogen peroxide,
Mhm.
right? And you probably know hydrogen peroxide has been around for a long time. We use it to clean our wound, and it's used in many industrial process. And traditionally, it's made from the process that involves chemical from petrochemical process. So it's centralized. You actually a few countries that make it, and you ship it in large tank shipping container, right? You can imagine that it's actually highly reactive, and it's somewhat of um, explosion prone. But even with that centralized model makes more sense because it's cheaper. It's a commodity. But the value proposition for them is that they are making small electrolyzers, so a size of uh, um, a washing machine. And the value of this is there are some operators, for example, a hospital, um, water plant treatment, they don't need a lot. So if they order from these centralized facility, they can only order once a year, and nobody wants to drive the truck to them. And they have to build this facility that is explosion proof. But with Solidec, they make this small size electrolyzer that produce on site and supply as needed. So they don't have to store like a size of 1 ton, so they can produce as it goes, so they don't have to be worried about explosion. And they don't have to, the site doesn't have to pay extra costs for somebody to ship it to them once a year. So this is an example of rethinking the whole process. We don't have to
Mhm.
have a centralized industrial process. You can have distributed manufacturing on site, manufacture as needed. So and this makes sense for them because it's a small user. This is and this solution doesn't work for everyone, right? There are some people who still need the old solution because they need what 1,000 ton a year. So this uh, truck could be shipping it in or piping it in. But for smaller user, I think this makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, that's true. And you can also encourage startups then to identify new customers that have needs that are not fulfilled yet.
Exactly, exactly.
When we look, I recently read the book The Innovator's Dilemma. It was a book I think written 25 years ago or something.
Hmm.
It's a great book still. There are a lot of learnings in it. And what I really always wonder is when I look at the large industrial players, for example, 25 years ago, General Electric was one of the big players. Jack Welch, the uh, I mean, it was like a big star as a CEO, building the greatest company, and then GE declined. What I always wondered, and you have experience in academia, in venture capital, and in the industry, what I always wondered is what is holding these big companies back? I mean, Jack Welch was a fan of this black belt Six Sigma system, and I always wondered why are they so reluctant to innovation? What in your opinion, what holds them back to just redesign their own system and avoid being taken over like Tesla did with the combustion engine?
Right.
What is the problem in big companies from your point of view?
I think you did mention Six Sigma, right?
Mm,
So it's Six Sigma, it's you trying to improve each stage, each step, right? So when you're so focusing on making that incremental change, it's hard to get away and rethink the process because you perfect each process to like optimize it to the end, right? And this is I have a great anecdote that I talk to petrochemical conglomerate, and I think, to be fair, I think industry these days have learned from some of these lessons, right? And they have tried to rethink the process, and some of it being necessity, some of it being competition is doing it, right? So I talked to one petrochemical sustainability officer. He said he he optimized all the process there is, right? He used all the renewable that he could, all the energy efficiency software. So he's at his wit's end, right? If the company doesn't change the process, there's no more like green or CO2 to be reduced from current process. So if the mandate is to reach carbon neutral, they need to rethink this. So that is one way of being forced by regulation, external force. But if the company is so focusing on being lean and squeezing all the efficiency out of their process, I think it's getting into that mindset of being incremental change.
Mm. Europe is an expert in regulation. That doesn't work all the time.
Right, right. Well, I mean, that is a very fair comment. But not only regulation, right? You have competition.
Mm.
This is why being open to external pressure sometimes drive the change, right?
Yeah, and sometimes the fascinating thing is that sometimes it comes really, really late, really, really late. Everybody's seeing it coming. It's like electric vehicles. Everybody saw it. Tesla didn't start build yesterday. They started, I think Elon Musk took over the company in 2003 or something. And he advocated for electric vehicles for over 20 years, principle. And Tesla was laughed at, was talked down, and especially here in Europe, nobody could imagine that some crazy person in California can build an entire industry from scratch. And what I always wondered is why do companies not innovate faster by themselves? I mean, you mentioned tool regulation is one way to force them into this external pressure, but could it not be more intrinsic in your opinion, so that not external factors need to contribute, but that they set up an innovation system? How would an innovation system internally look like, in your opinion, that motivates companies to take the first step before the pressure comes in?
That's a great question. And this is why um, I'll share from my experience. I think people get into the routine, right?
Mm.
I mean, this is speaking from my experience because I had to cross over from being a steady professor job. You walk in, you know what to do, right? As opposed to when you work with startup, I don't know who I'm going to meet today, what industry I'm going to be talking about today. So I think this is why a lot of people said it's much more difficult to unlearn because you know what to like. It's a corporate job, right? You come in, you know what to do. And I think some corporate are very mindful of this. And I think even European CVC are doing a very good job. I think there are a few very innovative companies in Europe that set out to have CVC go out there and find new technologies and trying to innovate outside in, right? Trying to get that osmosis, bring the startup to work internally. But there's still some friction. And I think definitely, and it's not, I don't think it's only Europe. Uh, a lot of CVC trying to bring in innovation startups to work with their internal team. There is still friction, but I think it's a learning process too, right?
Mm.
To it's the startup that fast versus people who has been in this job, they know what the pain points are. I think it's learning how to be uncomfortable working with something new. And also it does take imagination because a lot of what startups set out to do, not that they're not successful, but it morphs into different things, right? We see recent announcement, boom, supersonic. They want to do a supersonic jet plane,
Yeah.
but recently they just signed a contract to power
Yeah.
data center, right? So I think it takes a little bit of imagination, having the ability to fail, having the ability to navigate this uncertainty. I think everybody kind of have to learn to expand their comfort zone a little bit, right?
I like this example that you brought up. It was recently, I saw it, I think, on X. Yeah, it was in my news feed. That this supersonic company pivoted when part of the business towards providing, I think, gas. It was a gas turbine.
Gas
When I
turbine.
do that, did you have time to dig a little bit in the story how they found this pivot point? It's completely different. It's from air, planes flying in the air to providing gas turbines for data centers. I mean, did you have time to think this through? Why did this
I
happen?
don't I don't have I didn't read into nitty-gritty detail, but
Mm.
part of it is they built a jet engine, so a gas turbine jet engine that is, I believe, was very efficient. So it's a high energy density, and because data center is popping up everywhere, and they're hungry for power. So anything that can provide power, they'll be happy to sign contract. I think that's where it happens. And this is a great point about pivot also. And this is what set great founder apart from regular folks, right? To recognize that opportunity. So it's a lot of it. It's the founder go out and trying to find business opportunity. And we also have an example. So for us, I've for Solidec initially, where I gave you example of water treatment using hydrogen peroxide, but because rare earth has come into
Mm.
discussion. So one of the process is using hydrogen peroxide. So they actually went and found a mining company and signed contract. So I think I give the credit for the team, the company's team that go out and find business opportunity, because we don't know really what different application the technology can lend itself in.
When you look at these stories, both of them, and we try to find a principle, I mean, there's this philosophical discussion. Um, are these two companies just lucky that they were at the right time at the right place? They were just there and things happen out of luck? Or is this the logical end result of the process before that they really worked hard for 1 or 2 decades, prepared everything, gained a lot of insight, and then could connect the dots? When you look at these two philosophical endpoints, pure luck, pure preparation, um, how important are these two parameters in these scenarios?
Uh, Great questions, but in our business, we say there is no beating timing.
Mm.
And that you can equate to luck, but I do give the startup teams full credit that they've done a lot of work to find customers and they just keep at it. I know they talk to a lot of people, and probably 80% of people they talk to may not be their customer, but they still go out there and trying to find that customer. So I do give them all the credit that yes, it's luck, but without that preparation, I don't think they would be that lucky.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's a hard, tough work selling something
Right,
and
right.
finding business
Yes.
models.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
we think a little bit about the founders listening to this episode, you said that rethinking and their industries is important, not just incremental steps. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
for for getting the perspective right, you need on one hand a lot of insight into an industry, which always risks that people then think in incremental steps. Um, on the other hand, you need curiosity and new people who know nothing about the industry. Um, how can founders then address this one problem point when they have an idea and think the idea can work and is a fundamental shift? How can they approach it to find out whether it's really a fundamental shift to something new or they just found the next incremental step? But what's your opinion how founders should think their idea through so that they can make an informed decision about let's move forward, it's fundamental, or maybe it's not the best idea?
Um, that's um that's a great question. Uh, and here's how I think about it, at least from what I observe from a founder. I think a lot of time it is a hypothesis. So they hypothesize that this could be a major disruption. This could be um, a game changer, but they have to do the work to validate that hypothesis, right? So they go out and talk to customers. And that's what I said. They'll probably talk to 1,000 customer or 1,000 people in the field. I know a lot of the companies that we invested in, they talk to customers like every day. And each customer 10 times before it goes anywhere. So in those conversations, you validate your hypothesis. And if it doesn't work, then you have a new hypothesis. And that's why often we would ask them to tell us about their customer discovery process. Who do they talk to? What have come up? What come out from those conversations?
That's an interesting point. Let's stay a little bit before we move to synthetic biology.
Sure.
One final question to that part, talking to customers.
Mm-hmm.
I hear scientists that I worked with in the past, also scientists today in Europe, in the United States, also in Asia,
Mm-hmm.
objecting this approach and say, why should I talk to customers? We do science here. It's scientific. You don't understand our business. So this is big science. Why should we go out to talk to customers? What message would you give them if they say, okay, look, we are in a very early science stage. It doesn't make sense to go out to talk to potential customers for us. What message do you give them?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, right? Great sign is a great sign. But we want to make products that people use, right? And I think some scientists say, oh, a pharma, for example, right? Pharmaceutical product, you don't like people, you have cancer, you have to use whatever the doctors prescribe to you. But to get to the point where it becomes a product, somebody needs to make it. If a big pharma doesn't want to help you make it or sell it, then those cancer patients would never get your product. So
Mm.
there are, even if you don't want to talk to customer, if it's a B2B business, you still need to know who's involved in this process, right? So you may not say, you may not talk to a customer, but your partner Think about, I mean, NVIDIA, they design chips, but if TSMC can't make it, that's it, right? So there are a lot of people involved, and this is why it's so difficult to change processes because there's a long supply chain until things get to you.
Yeah, that's the next philosophical question. I think, when does product design start? What's the right point to think in product design terms and turn a little bit down the scientific mind?
Say that one more time.
I mean, the question that popped up in my mind is another philosophical. What is the right point in time for a startup company or a scientist to think in terms of product design? Think forward,
Mm.
think about customer, and tune a little bit down his scientific mind and say, okay, it's not so much about producing. For me, science is always producing new know-how, information, new knowledge. And as long as you produce new knowledge and insights, that's fine. That's great. It's great science. But when we get something into a company, it's more going towards the market and the product. What's the right point in time for a scientific team to switch their mindset from pure scientific thinking into
Um,
more product-oriented thinking?
yeah, this is a great question, and I think it varies a lot from different technologies, right? So, for example, I'll give you a nuclear fusion
Mm,
example where there's a lot of theoretical work that's been done where you could, in theory, you could have nuclear fission reaction, but in practice, there are only a few handful of companies that have fusion reaction,
mm,
even at pilot scale, right? And there are a lot of companies that are trying to build equipment that can prove that their theory can generate fusion reactions. So those are still scientific risks. So you still need to prove that your science work. For companies that has fusion reaction, then it becomes engineering problem. Can you scale it up and sustain fusion reaction? And there will be a different team that say, oh, if this happens, I need to go talk to someone, you utility company, whatnot, whatever partner they have, to say, if I have a fusion reaction that is sustained, how do we deliver it to customer? So it really depends on what stage of the company, what stage of technology. But keep in mind that often customers don't need to know, right? Or they don't care. I mean, you pick up a phone, you don't need to know how electron is moving or even like how program is written, right? You just use your phone and that's it, right? So it's the same way. Yes, you can have 5G, whatnot, or 10G. It could be talking into space. I don't know. As long as I get on the phone, I get on the plane, I can still use it. I'm underwater, I still use it. I think that's fine. If I dip it in water a little bit, it's still functioning. I think it's fine. So with that in mind, I think what scientists need to center, maybe think about, yes, they need to work, get the science to work, but what is it that they are selling to the customer, right?
mm.
And if the sign is enough to sell to the customer, then you move on and work on engineering problem, make it last longer and make it prettier, make it smaller so that customer like it that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the core point for me is that science is good, science is great, and it's a fundamental starting point. But at the end of the day, the team needs to connect their scientific ideas to real-world problems.
Yes.
And for connecting ideas to real-world problems, they don't need a product. They need first an understanding of what's the problem actually people have, and does this problem connect to what they are building at the end of the day? And
Yeah.
while you were speaking, I mean, the best example that pops up in my mind is Bill Gates, how he founded Microsoft at the end of the day. He licensed, it was a business model innovation at the end of the day. He licensed a piece of software that he didn't own at the time of underwriting the contract. And after he had secured the license deal, he went out on the market and purchased the product at the end of the day for a fixed sum. Um, but it underlines what you say. Go out to people and talk with potential customers to learn how they think, what problems they have, and whether their problem connects really well to your solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Your solution is answering their problem, right?
Yeah. If there is no intersection of solution and problem, and I think this is what happens very often with garage companies or lab companies, they build, and you can motivate a lot of investors to invest money into it. But if it doesn't connect to a real world problem, you have something nice that nobody wants.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think this is also important for your core topic, synthetic biology.
Mm-hmm.
That you mentioned it earlier in the conversation, and in your preparation material, you wrote that it's the new industrial toolkit for carbon recycling.
Mm-hmm.
For non-scientific investors and VCs, what does this mean in simple terms?
Uh-huh. So, so imagine traditionally when we make industrial chemical, right? So we build large chemical plant, you dig up petrochemical, you refine it, and the byproduct of this become a few carbons, right? One carbon, two carbon, and we pass it through chemical reactor to convert it into products. So for synthetic biology, it's a tool where instead of making product in this very chemical way, we use biological uh, organism, microbes like yeast, E. coli, to convert carbon in forms of sugar, food that we eat, right, into products like you see biodegradable plastic. You started to see in Huue indigo dye. We already use some of the protein are made this way too. Like insulin, for example, are made this way. And you may ask, but not all E. coli can make indigo dye in blue. This is where synthetic biology comes in, that it's a tool where you can change a gene of microbes so that you can insert the gene that can produce indigo dye. So when it grows and eats sugar, then in that process, it can produce indigo dye. Or in the case of insulin, so the cells convert sugar or whatever nutrient, just like we eat food, into insulin protein because the gene sequence that make insulin is inserted into these microorganisms.
How disruptive is this for all industries, in your opinion?
I think definitely a new way of doing things. It could be disruptive in a lot of industrial chemical, but the ones that we already started to see, it's in food. So you see the wave of alternative protein, right? Some of the proteins are made this way. You see milk protein or perfect day. It's by engineering microbes to produce milk protein. So you don't have to have a cow, harvest the milk from the cow, and um, purify and get a certain protein. So you can just using synthetic biology tool to make milk protein and feeding the bacteria or microbe with sugar, it converts it into protein. So you purify the brew from that and then get the milk protein, and then you mix it with other components to make ice cream or milk or cheese.
Milk, I think there is China is there drinks a lot of milk, if I remember it
Uh,
right. So it's
uh-huh.
there are huge markets out there at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned one of your companies. I hope I spell it right. Ubio. Is this the right?
Q Bio. Yes,
Ubio.
yes,
You
yes.
mentioned it a couple of times with indigo and the color. Can you
Hmm.
walk us through the case study from the time you met the company, what attracted you to this company,
Hmm.
why you think indigo is a great business case, why you invested in the company, and what
Hmm.
challenges they solved?
Hmm. So indigo, it's started off being a natural product, right? And and because we use so much of it, then in order to make a lot of it cheaply, so it's made by chemical process, and it involves a lot of toxic chemicals, a lot of waste. So this I what attracted me to HuBio is because it's a natural process we use. It's not not quite natural process we use in synthetic biology tools, but it's a much milder process. It doesn't generate waste the way chemical process does, and it's attractive because you make indigo that goes into a dyeing gene. So it's unlike any other fabric. You could have like 10 different colors, right? Jeans, there's only one color. And it's a great quality. And you dry it. Once you make it the dye, then it's one color. You purify it, then it's used exactly the same way traditional in chemical process indigo is made. So we call it a drop-in replacement. So that way it doesn't disrupt the whole supply chain. The dye mills don't have to change that process. And this is environmentally friendly alternative. So that's why I think it's a great example of synthetic bio in an industrial process.
Why is there such a difference in being environmentally friendly? The old process, chemical process versus the new one. I mean, process is process. Why is there such a difference?
Oh, because when you do a chemical process, right, you go through multiple steps. I forgot. I'm not. I don't remember the indigo process, but it involves like sometimes you use toxic catalyst,
Mhm.
and then you have to clean it. In cleaning that, it takes a lot of solvent. So it takes a solvent like hexane, which is also from indigo dye. Yeah, it's a lot of organic solvent that usually you clean it, you use about 10 times the organic solvent that will go to waste. There's acid, there's very strong acid, a strong base that gets involved. So it's a very uh, involved, it's a process that involved with multiple chemicals, multiple steps that generate a lot of waste.
And
As
this
opposed, so
and this at
sorry.
this at the end of the day reduces the carbon output. So it's basically more
Yes,
environmental friendly,
yes,
switching from one
definitely.
process from the old process to the new one.
Right, right. Yes, definitely.
And for the industry, nothing changes basically. So they get a color they can use, and all these subsequent processes are pretty much the same. So
Yes,
only the input factor changed.
yes. So from the user perspective, right? We don't have we still get genes that will fade the same way. It doesn't run off. And that's what we all care about, right? It's not gonna stain anywhere. Like if we sit on our chair, it's not gonna stain the chair. It doesn't fade too fast, while being environmentally friendly.
Yeah, indigo, it's genes basically. So this is
Yes,
universal use.
right, right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
then they are apparel industry. There's everything that's blue is a potential customer.
Yes, yes. But there in blue color there are different type of blue, right? But in jeans, mostly indigo dye. So
Mm.
that's why it's a little bit less tricky than just dyeing any other fabric.
And what about a cost perspective? Is this company also doing the production cheaper at a cheaper price point than the old
Uh,
process?
this is actually kind of a hurdle with new technology. So because we perfect these industrial processes over the last 80 years. So we've had the cost down to like the most optimized, right? Versus these are new upstarts that are coming in. At least at at this point where scales are at small scale, the it's difficult to be competitive on the cost level. And this is why where a lot of companies start with a market so that they can corner that market. And as we scale further, price have come down so that it could be competitive with the current offering in the market.
How how do companies like Huue Bio find this niche market? What's the secret?
Uh, this is actually so it again goes back to the founding team. I think it takes a lot of strategy and planning, right? And this is why they try to partner up with partners that have the goals that are aligned, have their sustainability initiative, and where their customers also have sustainability initiative. Because at the end of the day, these are initial market
Mm.
introduction. So the price of the product will be higher. So if the customers are not aligned with the company's mission, they're not gonna be willing to pay such high margin, right? Initial early adopter price. So it's finding the brand, the partner that, and with the customers that align with their mission. That's very important. And I do give them credit for going out and find these partners.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting point about scaling complex production processes, which
Mm-hmm.
synthetic biology is at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You have something game changing, and then you find out, okay, the costs are incredibly high at the end of the day when you
Mm-hmm.
produce something because you don't have the scale like a traditional industry, as you said, 80 years
Mm-hmm.
of development. The competition could perfect everything. So also what Christensen in his books recommends is find a niche customer group.
Exactly.
And who is they're always out there. They are willing to pay, but the problem is that in order to find this small group of customers that get value, are willing to pay the price, are aligned with the mission of the company, and
Mm-hmm.
also see the potential, the founders need to go through a lot of rejection. So it's not like you make 100 calls and 90 people are super happy. It's the opposite. You make 100 calls and 99 people tell you, quite frankly, you suck. Your idea is stupid. Don't do
Right,
it.
right. Yeah.
What advice do you give founders who say, look, it's so frustrating. I called 10 people and they just said, no, this is idiotic. How should founders deal with that situation?
I think this is why a startup is a tough business, right? But the founders that decide to get into it, I think it's you have to have a stomach of steel. It's resiliency, right? That you can take 99 rejection just to get to that one yes, right? And I think another thing is to be open-minded. You never know where the lead is going to come from, or that kind of pivot, right, that we talked about earlier, like be agile, open-minded, ready for suggestion, because some of these could just be a suggestion from somebody who's very knowledgeable in the
Mhm.
field. It could be totally out there, right? Can you imagine being a CEO of Supersonic? Hey, I'm gonna make supersonic plane. If somebody suggests, hey, why don't you go talk to a data center? You said no, and that's it, right? There's no pivot for you. So there's that um willingness to listen, resilient, and ready to pivot, ready to learn, think about new way of thinking about your different approach of thinking about your business, I think.
This is I think this is an important part for innovators. I mean, in hindsight, it's always clear. Looking at Nvidia today, it's clear how they did it, what they did, what was the right decision. But when people are in the game, making the decision, is this pivot just noise, adding to the noise and bringing us in the wrong direction? Or is this the fundamental shift that we were looking for that unlocks an entire new market with high margins that we were not thinking about? Um, from your investment point of view, how do you recommend, what framework do you recommend for entrepreneurs and investors to make such decisions when they appear in the right way?
I it's a very it's totally valid but very difficult to decide, right? Because
Mm,
when you're in it, it's hard to tell. But for me, this is why, again, I go back to my earlier point about often it's not a decision, it's the hypothesis that you want
mhm,
to
mhm,
test, right? And this is why you have to have, this is some people, we say fail fast, fail forward, fail often, right? That these hypotheses you test, if you fail, then move on, right? But knowing that it doesn't work, it's better than not knowing at all, right? So if it doesn't, like, you test hypothesis, it doesn't work, move on, test more. But you have to be deliberate in what are you testing. So it's not about trying something new. It's about, we are trying to see if this market it's willing to pay. If you talk to a few customer making no headway, then maybe a different um, industry might be better, or seek out advice, somebody who's being in the field for a long time. And this is why find a great mentor, find great advisors, trying to use them as your resource to test some of these hypotheses. But I think there is no way to know. And you just have to get out there and try it. And but I say this with total respect for startup founder, because often you are startup founders have very limited resources, being
mhm.
money or human capital. So, I mean, they make tough decision every day. So, but I think in order to make those decisions well, we want to be deliberate about what we test and what kind of outcome we are expecting to see, or if we have a certain outcome, how do we proceed? I think so that it doesn't feel it doesn't become such a distraction.
I think this is one of the most important points for investors interested in investing in early stage companies or acting like venture capitalists. It's investing in experiments, in hypotheses, and not in proven business models at the end of the day. So how do you how do you recommend investors to approach such an environment where basically it's investing in experiments? What's your recommendation?
So one of the things that we use, it's not set in stone, but a lot of investor, we like repeated founder. So if you have a track record that like gets you like out of 100, you'll be the first one, right? Because you've been through this cycle, you know how to test these, where you make calls, repeated founder one, repeated founder in the same field, in like decarbonization, for example, or this is why we see a lot of repeated founder in pharmaceutical industry. So you know the industry well, you know how it works, the different players, different type of partnership. That, and some people, because they invest because they like to work with startups, they work to work with founders. So that also gives you a way into like the front seat to see how they make decisions, how they experiment, how do they test some of these ideas. And there's some people who actually go even further. They only invest in venture building model. That is, they invest and they become a CEO and then drive that. So there are different level of
Mm.
involvement.
And as a CEO, then you have fulfilled your career goal and you can live happy ever after. But there are a lot of downstream problems. Since we are talking about investing already,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about your fund, what you do,
Mm-hmm.
how you pick investors, how you pick companies, and I think everybody wants to be very good at picking the winners. My first question to you about Vector Capital is
Mm-hmm.
your fund typically writes 100 to 400,000 US dollar checks
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
at pre-seed and the seed stage.
Mm-hmm.
So for picking winners, you usually have a first call with the founders. They come to you. It's 30 minutes to 60 minutes. What are your 3 to 4 killer questions that tell you everything you need to know about the investment case that you ask in these first 30 minutes?
I wanted to know who are the founders. This is founders are very important to me, and just like I mentioned, repeated founder, right? And what pain are they trying to solve? This is actually turned out to be one of the, it's not a difficult question, but often founders don't answer me. I mean, they say different things, and because we do decarbonization, right?
Mm.
Then the pain becomes, oh, because the world is the globe is heating up, so it's getting hot, so climate change, so that's a pain. And then it becomes okay, then you can do like you can solve everything in the whole wide world, right? So it doesn't, like, I ask that a lot, but I don't never quite get an answer. And then why you and why now,
Mm.
right? And often people think they have unique technology when unique, it's too narrowly defined. I think those are the three things: who the founders, what are the pain point, and why you and why now. Because again, going back to timing, right?
Mm.
Right? Time you can't be timing or luck. So that's also very important.
Yeah, yeah, timing. Why now? I think this is often overlooked. That why now is such an important point. Um, do you have from your experience, from your portfolio, and from the companies
Mm-hmm.
you talk to, do you have an
Mm-hmm.
example of a company that succeeded not with a new idea, but they were just at the right time with the idea?
I'm trying to think at the right time. My, well, I mean, I talk about Solidec, right?
Mm, mm,
And I do give the founders credit for this, right? I like the founder a lot. I like their technology. I think because renewable energy is coming, the cost, it's very highly competitive. So I think the next phase of chemical process would be electrolyzer or electrochemical. So I like the technology, I like the idea, but because of this geopolitical tension, then rare earth become a big deal, and they're able to pivot to serve that market. I think they get a great contract when they're actually a pre-seed company. I don't usually see pre-seed company having a joint development contract, so I think they've done a great job.
Yeah, rare earths is a good example. I think with the advent of artificial intelligence, the energy need with it, now all governments in the world, I think, wake up and realize this needs a lot of raw material that nobody was
Mm-hmm.
thinking about 10 years ago. It was just like rare
Mm-hmm.
earths. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. All of
that's
a
interesting.
sudden, rare earth, it's super hot. I mean, we were talking to a few rare earth recycling company,
Mhm.
and it was kind of like in the background. They're trying to raise fund. Nobody wants to give them even like 100K, right? And with all these geopolitical spat, all of a sudden they get money from DOD, grant money to, yeah, so
This
very,
is as I said, luck or preparation. And when you think about it, what I realized is that in order to answer this why now question, people already need to be building at a time where they already know that now is not the right time. It's You started with COVID, for example, our conversation, that you pivoted in COVID and thought about it. It's like in the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, vaccines for a very long time were not considered to be a game-changing technology, and who needs it? We solved
exactly,
all problems. And
exactly,
suddenly you have one event that changes everything. But in 2020, starting a vaccine company was too late, basically.
exactly,
And
exactly,
the right time was 2010. So
exactly.
this is really, really important.
Yeah. So this is why I think for early stage investor, we're trying to look ahead also to see for example, like data center, if it's going to be popping up, like what's the implication? And people look ahead, way ahead, right? So data center, like you probably see in the news, data
Mhm.
center needs to be in space because it's make more sense that we have constant supply of the sun, solar energy, whatnot. So that kind of thing, I think we and I know like stuff that we invest in today will probably not be commonplace like next year, but we still hope to see a lot of what we invested in be commonplace in what 5 or 10 years.
How, one question, how do you train this forward-looking or forward-thinking muscle? Imagining a future, how it can be, and then coming back and think, okay, what technology could solve these future problems? Just to put a little bit more context around it, you mentioned data centers. Um, 25 years ago, nobody was talking about data centers. So the usual approach was, if you need a server, you have it in-house.
Right,
Amazon was the first, I think, in 2008 or 9, who said, okay, I
right.
mean, we can
Mhm,
offer cloud storage services. So cloud
mhm.
was mostly just something to store away. And I remember from an IT conversation back in 2007, cloud services were just evil. You don't do that as a serious company. You
Right,
need to protect your IP and your data, and you can only do that in-house. Now, when I talk with IT personnel, they just say, yeah, AWS, what else? I mean, it's the safest space for your data. Then came
right.
NVIDIA with compute, blockchain technology, fired it up, and it just kept evolving and evolving and evolving. So when someone wants to do now something with cloud storage, it's a little bit too late. So the market is taken. For you as an investor, it means you always need to think ahead 5 to 10 years. How can the future look like? Um, how do you approach this? How do you train this?
To be honest, I don't think so the thing is you hear success story, right?
Mm,
and I'm telling you good success stories. So or investment that we think it's will have a future. In reality, we don't know, and I don't know, right? That's why I think we need to be open-minded. We have to have this curiosity and experimenting.
Mhm.
Not that I don't trust. I mean, like we go through rigorous investment process, but like any other startups, right? There's a chance of failing, and but and also just even a thinking exercise, right? You see this would potentially could be the next thing, but in all you can invest in even public market, right, where the information is available. Some company will fail still. So I think it's that the ability like to accept failure. And I'm sure, I'm honest, these companies, all the success stories, I'm sure they have their failed project. They try something that fail and they may have shared or not shared. I mean, look at Google. They've had their Google X and their moonshot, and some are not working quite well. I mean, because they're public about
Yeah.
it, so we know, but there are some like we only hear about success stories, so we think, oh, they can predict the future. But in reality, I think everybody there's right and wrong, and we this is to the best of our ability, right? We read, we look in the past, see how the industry is developed, how the ecosystem of the industry is developed. But I mean, Blockbuster went away, Kodak went away. So there's right and wrong, and that's how we push the technology envelope, right? It's, it's because of this trial and willingness to fail sometimes. We just hope that we succeed more time than failing.
Yeah, that's true. At the end of the day, especially I think us men want to be the one who can predict everything. But at the end of the
Right.
day, it's just experimentation. So you can't know.
Exactly.
It's experimentation.
Right, right.
And you mentioned an interesting point about how you talk to founders and what's important to you. And you mentioned the personality, the founders, the humans. And the more I hear and learn about investing in early stage, it really seems to be less about technology, um, but more about character traits. And my question to you is, what are you looking for in founders? What character traits do you want to see?
I think I think I did mention, right? Resilience, it's
Mm,
very important. Um, because you're gonna hear a lot of no's before you hear yes. And all these hypotheses that you're testing, it cannot be all succeeding. Other, if you're 100% succeed, that means you don't try hard, like you don't experiment enough, right? So I think that is one. And also I think um, I like to see um, what founder, they're really passionate and passionate, not emotionally passionate, but like married to their mission. I
mm.
see a lot of mission driven founders that they'll do anything to get to their mission, talk to 1,000 customer to achieve their mission. I think that's very important. And the last one that we look for a lot is coachability.
Mm.
This is not just us, right? I mean, nobody knows everything. So when an expert or their advisor suggests or trying to coach them, I hope that they would listen and adapt. And this coachability is also kind of related to that ability to pivot, to change that direction, to take the cue as it comes, right?
How many people exist in the world fulfilling this profile? I mean, I noticed down it's a resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, coachability, and what was the second in between? There was the
Mission driven or passion
yeah.
about their mission.
So I just try to think it through. On the one hand, resilience means that you don't, for me, that you don't give up when everybody else would already give up, I would say.
Uh-huh.
So um, being mission driven for me is a little bit also being stubborn. Otherwise, you would not be mission driven. And then the third character trait was just like for me, but how does it work in a person? Because coachability means being open to other people, to other ideas. Doesn't that contradict a little bit resilience and being mission driven?
So okay, I'll give you an example, right? Our we invested in a company called Ingrediome. They do this very interesting uh, process. They insert meat protein, a gene sequence to produce meat protein into algae. So they grow out as they grow algae, it grows meat protein, and they
Mm,
harvest the protein and add it into to make alternative protein. So it tastes very good. I've tried it a few times. So the founder has done using the same technique, but not alternative meat, and then with a different team. And then the founder did went on separate direction. So he spun out and redo this, rethink the process. So because he used algae so that it could reach cost price parity, uh, because algae, you don't feed it anything. It just photosynthesis, converting CO2 into protein. So he's like, first time around he tried, it didn't work. So he started another company, and he was just talking to everyone that I know. I know some people get annoyed talking to him too, but I love it. And then when I suggest him to talk to a few more people, he's like, yes, set up the meeting. I'll be there. And he takes all suggestions. So it's this is the kind of trait, like be open but being persistent, and people say no, but it's still okay. And he would smile. He just smiled talking to everyone, very good humor. But when it comes to time to seek advice, he'd be open. He'd come out and say, these are things we need to get done. Any advisor, anyone on the board, do we have an input? We're going to go this way, who see it differently. So it's very collaborative.
mm.
Yeah. I don't know if that gives you a better.
Yeah, I would reframe it for me a little bit, knowing your limitations. So as a CEO, as a founder, where you need help, where your
Mm,
where are your blind spots, where are you
right,
not
right,
not not the best one. At the end
right.
of the day, it's a team play.
It,
At the end of the day, building a company is a team play. It's not
yeah,
a team,
exactly,
not a
exactly.
one-person mission,
Yes, yes, yes,
and nobody can be perfect at everything.
yes, yes.
When we think about pitching to
Hmm.
you, you invest in early stage, and very often I think also these companies, even when they can address the pain point and have
Hmm.
the character traits, but they are still early stage.
Hmm.
And especially in synthetic biology, it means at one point in time the team needs to scale their production process. It's bacteria basically
Right,
that's
right,
that's
right,
doing something. And from my
right.
own experience, I know that scaling is very often a very limiting factor. And when scaling is not
Yes.
possible, the whole idea is not worth pursuing. How do you approach scalability in early stages? What are your telltale signs that you say, okay, I think this can work? This can not only scale technically, but also economically.
Um, that is very tricky, and we're trying to learn. We're building this expertise as well. Often we when we invest in pre-seed, right? They're probably first time out of the lab, so they'll be producing at what, like 10-liter scale. This is nothing, right? It's probably like to produce a tiny bit for the customer to try. So what we go about doing it is looking at kind of get insider information. We have scientific limits. So we ask them for their techno-economic analysis, right? And most of the time, oh, it's at scale, it's great. But so we're trying to do some internal checking also. If the amount that they are going to reach, is it beyond scientific limit? Is it scientifically possible? Then there are some operational limits, right? So for example, algae, I talked about Ingrediome too. So I actually had a back channel talk to some people who invest in algae farms in Thailand, and all of them lost money, right?
Mhm.
And then I said, well, like what's the largest expense? It turns out that these people went after an algae species that generates oil because they were thinking about replacing oil. Use growing algae, and turns out these special species of algae needs to be cultivated at 25 Celsius
Oh,
outdoor in the sun
oh,
in Thailand.
yeah.
So a lot of energy costs going into cooling these algae. So this is why, so when we were looking at Ingrediome, we want to make sure, oh, it grows in natural condition. We don't need to heat it or cool it. It grows in like proper environment, like normal atmospheric environment. So that kind of insider information. So we do talk to advisors, experts in the field, trying to collect that kind of information. Do first reality check, right? So and once we invest, we as they go through these steps, some we catch them as they doing this, but some will kind of coach them through it. Often startups, as they scale, they caught in this catch 22. Like their off taker will say, oh, if you can make like a ton, I'll buy it. But they don't have money to produce a ton because off-taker needs to pay them first. So it's like the off-taker won't pay unless they have a ton. So that's why they caught in the middle. Or sometimes they need to build a manufacturing facility that that can produce a ton, right? But they don't have cash because if this off-taker does it, take this first ton, would they
Mm.
take the second ton? So what we recommend them is first, the best. If the off-taker is so married to you, willing to build the manufacturing facility, that's the best, right? If not, we have some sort of kind of co-development, uh, 50-50, or some sort of binding agreement that you're going to off-take it for the next 10 years, a ton per year. So that way you have kind of a confidence or comfort of, hey, if I invest, somebody's going to use it. And this is a way to prove that the need, the demand, it's real, right? It's not your imagination, or it's not just your off-taker say, oh, yes, maybe we'll do it. Well, they
Yeah.
say they'll off-take it, but in reality, maybe we'll buy it from you.
Yeah, this is an interesting point that you mentioned now. The When you talk to people, they often say, yes, 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 of course, when it's there, then I need it, but they know it's 5 years in the future, so it doesn't cost them money today. And so you can easily confirm the question and say, yeah, yeah, if you're there, I buy it. And then you arrive there, you have it, you call them and say, no, 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 now that they should put down money, I don't. This verification, is this a real need or is this just an ICT? This is really, really important.
Right, exactly. And that is to go back to out verify, validate, right? That
Mm.
it's you are actually solving somebody's pain because they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, this is one of the important things. Make sure that they're really willing to pay for it at the end
Exactly.
of the day. And for that, they need to go over a tremendous internal hurdle. It's psychological. It's not easy to give away money for some reason.
Right.
Um, Solving a pain is one thing, but solving a pain that is so high that it feels easier to give away money
Mm-hmm.
than living with the pain, this is a very special hurdle, very special psychological hurdle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this brings me to the next point that in your area, usually you're 7 to 10 years away from commercial viability and having this product at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
But you also need to give money back to your LPs. So they want to see some return at the end of the day, which
Mm-hmm.
means you manage a portfolio that is not like having cash on a bank account, linear producing returns. So it's really investing. There's a long time of nothing, and then suddenly you produce
Mm-hmm.
the returns. How do you manage your LPs over such a long period of time psychologically?
I right, right. So I think first of all, we have a 10-year period. So yes, if we return money before that, that's great. But I think the expectation is 10 years. And a lot of, well, our LP are aligned on the mission, right? That we are driving this decarbonization. So that is lucky for us. We do provide them quarterly updates so they know how the portfolios are doing. So they at least they see the progress. So that money is going into driving some of these company. And we have yearly annual general meetings. So that's kind of bringing in the
Mhm.
portfolio companies to meet with the LP so that they see the progress firsthand. They can understand what the companies are doing.
That's good. I just checked the time and we are almost 2 hours in the recording. It's really interesting
Wow.
talking to you. Um, in the last 10, 15 minutes, I hope you
Hmm.
have still some time.
Yes, yes.
Um, let's talk a little bit about Southeast Asia. I have a
Hmm.
huge audience in the US and in Europe, not so much in Southeast Asia.
Hmm.
And let's help the investors in Europe and the US understand your region better, why it's attractive.
Hmm.
When you look at your region and you need to sell it to LPs, in your opinion, what unfair advantage does Southeast Asia have compared to Silicon Valley, for example?
Hmm. So I think living here, I do feel that we do feel a sense of urgency to have to address this climate change. And especially in Thailand, we are a manufacturing country, right? So actually in Thailand, our greenhouse gas emission profile might actually be different from the US or in the UK because the nature of business are different. We actually may be more aligned with Japan or in Germany. And I think what I see is that first, we feel the sense of urgency because we're impacted. Um, Second, because we have this manufacturing sector is huge. So we are going to be disrupted. So we need to find a way to address this with the unfair advantage of a lot of natural resources. And this is why it drives me to want to go into synthetic biology to begin with because we have water, we have feedstocks, it could cellulose, sugar, um, because we are that basket of, at least in APAC region anyway, produced rice, sugar cane, a lot of fruits, and we have large food industry. So a lot of those waste need to be taken care of. So I think we can totally take advantage of these carbon source to be a feedstock into synthetic bio or biomanufacturing processes in order to kind of shift the way we make some of these products into high value product instead of just exporting rice, exporting sugarcane.
A lot of
Yeah,
opportunity on the market.
yeah.
Um, you're one of the few people on the planet who worked in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
in Thailand, in Singapore, Southeast Asia, also interview companies from Europe. In your opinion, when you look at the cultural differences between Europe, the US, and Southeast Asia, what do LPs from Europe and the United States often misunderstand about Southeast Asian culture?
Um, I think, well, I am not sure. It's not quite a misunderstanding, but I think we are Asian, the way we do business, it's it's a trust, a very networking system. You need to know the person, you have to trust it. So you have to build relationship before before we start working together. And it could be business relationship, it could be personal relationship, as opposed to, in the Western world, it's a very rule-based society, right? This is what you do, you file report, and then you read the report, and then you understand each other. Voila, you can sign on the dotted line. So it doesn't quite work like that. And that's why um, sometimes it's perceived as things are going slower here, and a lot of it's because it takes time to build relationship, and that's why it's very important to have boots on the ground.
Yeah, that's important, I think. Having boots on the ground and not doing
Mm-hmm.
everything virtually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we come to the final questions in our conversation, let's train a little bit the forward-thinking muscle. When you look 20 years ahead into the future, in your opinion, if everything works out that you're investing in, that you think will change society for the better, what does the industrial world look like?
um I think there's gonna be, I really hope there's gonna be different type of uh what should we call it, different technology come into the market, and I'll explain how. For example, right now, the way we make industrial chemical, for example, we have centralized humongous industrial complex, right? You can see one in China, one in Eastern Seaboard in Thailand, one in Netherlands. I don't know if it's that active anymore. They're building one in Saudi Arabia, and we ship everything all over the world. I think as where the geopolitical conflict that is coming up and the new technology, I think we're gonna start to see more distributed, um, a smaller industrial complex, more on site, less of this global centralized location. And I think that will go into other things too, like with renewable energy, well, I mean, every house you can install solar cells and make sense. So I think it will be less concentrated industrial location, more distributed. And that could drive individual country resilience, and at the same time kind of be minimum impact to the environment.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Let's see how it play out. When you now are in a position and say you can magically change everything today as you
Mm-hmm.
want and to make the future happen, what do you see as the biggest blocking stone globally today? If we take that blocking stone away and you could do that, what would this be to make this future happen?
Hmm. So sad, but I feel like everybody has good intention, but they wanted to do their own way. I feel like why can't we just harmonize and have like one regulation and we all live happily ever after, right? But I'll give a simple example, right? In ASEAN, right? 13 country, very small region. Um, so I think the idea is we want to you have a unified grid so we can distribute electricity from Myanmar, Laos, all the way down to through Malaysia and Singapore, right? And it makes sense, right? That there are regions like Laos or Cambodia that can produce significant amount of electricity, but they don't use so much of it. Right now, we buy some. Thailand buys some. Myanmar also the same way. They generate electricity. They have a lot of natural gas, so we buy some electricity from them. But we also have huge renewable project that could also be distributed to other countries also. So it makes a lot of sense, right? But we cannot have a unified regulation. So this is why it's still stuck. And the same thing with the carbon credit, right? It makes a lot of sense. It's provide great incentive to decarbonize, yet we can't get our act together. So I think regulation is needed, but it just right now everybody has the mind of their own. So they want to do their own thing. So I think if we could li live cooperatively, that would be great. But I don't know if that's too much to ask.
Yeah, we had, I think, the last 25 years were a lot of cooperation globally.
Right.
I'm hoping we can continue on this path
Exactly.
and then stay in this mindset. I mean, when I think back to the 90s from the European perspective and look at the world now, I think a lot
Mm,
of good things happen. We are talking about
exactly.
data centers in space. Um, China has advanced from 1989 to now. China is probably going to lead innovation globally in the coming
Mhm.
years. So a lot of good things happen through global collaboration. If we
Exactly.
can keep that mindset, I think we can bring the whole humanity to the next level.
Exactly. Exactly. I really think it's it's we together as when we work collaboratively, everybody it lifts up everybody, right?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. My
Yeah.
final question to you, when when we think 6 months in the future and someone listens to this episode, and if this person should only remember one sentence from this conversation, what do you
Mm.
want this sentence to be?
I'll tie back to my earlier point. In the first hour, we had a discussion, right? I think I hope that we don't see climate solution as a cost, but think of it as funding the next industrial era.
That's a good point to finish the conversation. Wanwipa, thank you very much for this great conversation. Time flies when you have fun. I enjoyed every single second of it. And let's stay in touch and revisit the situation, I think, in 6, 12, 18 months.
Well, thank you, Christian, for having me. I really enjoy the questions and it makes me think, reflect on what we've been doing and kind of look ahead what more to be done. Thank you again for having me.
You're welcome, and I wish you a very nice evening. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. And if I don't talk to you, Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much to you too. See you
Mhm.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye.